Hi, this is Sean. So today, I'm here with my coffee in my peanuts cup, and I thought I'd make a video about peanuts to honor it really, and to explain why I love it so much and why I think it's a worthwhile thing to read and to experience. Hi, so this is Sean. So this is just some of the peanuts stuff I own. I'm not a massive collector or anything like that, but it's just stuff that I wear and stuff that I use in my life. Um, I love the comic strip. I have done for a number of years, and I also love French. So yeah, to fait pas de Bill, Charlie Brown. Um, from socks to shoes to wash bags to books to the comics. I have everything, and I also have tattoos. So I decided to get all the Peanuts characters, well, the male Peanuts characters tattooed on myself. So I have Linus and Schroeder. It's really difficult actually to show your own tattoos on screen. And I might someday get Lucy's psychology booth. So from 1950, when this first ever comic strip was released, which is fairly typical of kind of the tone of Peanuts, it lasted until 2000, and I've loved the strip for a long time. So I think it's interesting, really. It's been something that's been part of my life for a long time. It wasn't really part of my life during my childhood. But as I got a little bit older, I think the first time really that I realised that I really loved it was when the Complete Peanuts came out for the first time. I started to collect them, and I never pursued it or collected them all. And then over the last few years, I've got really, really into it. I think a lot of it is the aesthetics of it. I just like the drawings and the whole aesthetic of the 4 panel kind of comic strip. And also it's deeper than that. I think it represents something about the world, about me, and helps me and other people really to explore ideas about the world, and that's a really great thing. So obviously Charles Schulz was the writer and drawer of Peanuts, and he did everything throughout the comics run. He didn't have any help in drawing the strips, and which is great, really. It's been translated into many languages, and it was syndicated in hundreds of newspapers at its peak. And it started as a comic strip called Lil Folks, and that had a character called Charlie Brown in it, and then obviously it developed into Peanuts. What's quite interesting is apparently Schulz hated the name Peanuts, and he refused to use the name when he was being interviewed and things like that. It was thrust upon him by the powers that be, the bosses of the comic. So yeah, I mean it's a comic book about a guy called Charlie Brown who is, hapless and downbeat according to what I'm reading on my screen. And I think an obvious reason why I like it is because we can all kind of see ourselves a little bit in Charlie Brown. He fails quite a lot in the comic books, but he still continues to keep going. And the other characters apparently, represent other elements of us and other elements of what Schulz wanted to say about the world. And I think obviously, part of the attraction for me is it's got to be something to do with childhood. I could go to psychoanalysis, but maybe they could uncover it for me, but I don't really know why. But there's something quite innocent about Peanuts, and something quite beautiful about that innocence, and the fact that, if you've ever seen the TV shows, adults don't speak in the TV show, and when they do, it's kind of a drowned out kind of trumpet sound when adults speak. And there's something really interesting about that, the way it is about the children, just the children, and the adults don't muddy that world very much. So just a quote from something I've read. Schulz and Peanuts quotes Schulz's writing We are all pretty much what we were going to be early in our lives. Our personalities and characteristics are established, usually by the time we are 5 or 6 years old, but the lids are on. We're like boiling pots on a stove. He doesn't sentimentalize childhood, and he doesn't insult children with low intelligence as well, which is quite interesting. Another thing that I like about it is that, it's an interesting one, because on the one hand, I don't really like Disney. I don't like the fact that it's so in your face and everybody knows Disney and everybody likes it. And it's funny that Peanuts seems like a more alternative choice than Disney, but it really isn't, because it's everywhere. Sculpts made $60 million a year from the comic book, more than $1 billion in his own lifetime. And it's very, very, very successful throughout the world, but it still seems cool, and it still seems subversive in its way. And I kind of like that, because I think in any walk of life, there's this feeling that if something's popular, it means it's not very good. But that's not true, obviously. What about the Beatles? What about the Rolling Stones? What about the films of Stanley Kubrick? And so it is really, really in your face. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Another thing that I really like about Peanuts is that it does engage with quite deep and difficult topics through the lens of a 4-panel comic strip. So there's references to existential philosophy, Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, religious ideas. So here it says, although he came from a Christian religious background and in some ways identified as a Christian, Schulz also seems to have had existentialist and humanist leanings worthy of Jean-Paul Sartre or Samuel Beckett. The philosophy of existentialism suggests that we live in an empty universe and have no choice but to strive to make sense out of it. That's what Charlie Brown does. And one of my favourite strips from Peanuts is existentialist. Snoopy's saying there's no meaning in the world, there's no meaning, and then Charlie Brown comes to feed them and he says, meaning. Perhaps we're reading too much into it, perhaps we are, but I think that's the great thing about these comic books, that they can be everything to everybody. Whereas Waiting for Godot or Waiting for Godot, I don't even know how to pronounce it. I've never seen that, probably never will. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to understand it. Whereas Peanuts, everybody can enjoy it. Everybody can laugh at it. So, I read it to my son, and it's something that we share. And that's something that's great about it as well. It's kind of ageless. You might be thinking, it's not ageless. You're a 40-year-old man. You shouldn't be reading Peanuts. But I think, anybody can enjoy it in the same way that The Simpsons has quite a broad appeal. So yeah, definitely that kind of philosophical thing and the religious thing. Linus, apparently, for example, represents Sculptor's religious and spiritual side. And each of the characters can give us something in that way. Another cool thing about Peanuts is the references to other theories of the world, so like psychoanalysis. So if you are familiar with Peanuts, you'll know that Lucy has a psychoanalysis booth where she gives psychoanalysis for $5, I think it is. That is something that's really funny and really part of the zeitgeist, I guess, of the 60s, I think it was, when that started happening. And I think it helps us to think about some of those questions about life that we may have. I'm reading here from an article in the New Yorker. Through Peanuts, Schulz wanted to tell hard truths about, as he said, intelligent things, but the main truth he tells is that there are no answers to the big questions. no one wins, no one loses. This isn't drama. It's life. You know, and it is realistic in that way that Charlie Brown is a loser, and he's never going to become famous, or you know, he's just going to live a relatively mundane life, and there's nothing really wrong about that. And then, obviously, there is a caveat to that, because, you know, perhaps we are looking too much into it. So yeah, so some people started to basically overread Peanuts, and maybe I do that too. And an article that I read was talking about, you know, you can take university classes in the philosophy of The Simpsons or the philosophy of Mad Men or whatever, but perhaps we're going overboard there. But I'm not sure though. To be honest, I mean, I do agree that to a certain extent, perhaps we should just enjoy Peanuts for what it is. But I do believe that it's more than just pretty drawings and more than just four frames. You know. Another thing is that I just empathize with the characters. You know, Charlie Brown, and the fact that he fails quite a lot, and the musician side of Schroeder, and the spiritual side of Linus, and you know, it's something that means a lot to me. I do tend to like childhood and coming of age stories. Catcher in the Rye and is one of my favorite books, and that probably plays into it too. I think another thing about Peanuts is that it was kind of socially, it was kind of ahead of its time. So, you know, Lucy was a bossy female at a time when that wasn't necessarily normal. Peppermint Patty kind of subverted gender roles and things like that. And also, the character of Franklin was one of the first ever black characters in a mainstream piece of media. And also the fact that, you know, he did everything himself, sculpts, and you know, that's amazing when you think about it. You know, 50 years the comic lasted for, and he drew every single frame and wrote every single frame himself. I think another big thing about my love for Peanuts is the fact that it's quite bleak and kind of depressing, and you know, sometimes I think, is this a particularly great role model to show my son, because it is quite depressing quite a lot of the time, and I tend to be drawn to quite depressing things by nature. So, you know, as we've seen beforehand in the first ever comic strip, well, here comes good old Charlie Brown. How I hate him when he passes. You know, it's not particularly light-hearted. He never gets the ball. He never gets the little red-haired girl. But I do think the Peanuts is quite good for a family thing. You know, it's quite innocent, quite pure. There's no fighting in it. There's no violence in it. It's not very masculine and full of guns and things like that. And it's not racist, and it doesn't have any problematic characters in it, even though when the Charlie Brown movie came out, there was complaints that it wasn't very racially diverse. You know, I love the characters. You know, Lucy is the dominant one. Charlie Brown's the sensitive and supportive one who always tries. Linus is the kind of neurotic one. And Schultz did caution against taking his work too seriously. You know, apparently he said comic strips never will be art. They are too transient. He made 17,897 strips. But I do think that we need to disagree with him there. And obviously they've lasted. And obviously the comic strips will continue to last and continue to mean a lot to people over the course of the next few decades, and they will, you know, stand in time as being great works of art, I think. So yeah, tell me what you think about Peanuts, whether you like it and why you like it. What's your favourite character? What's your favourite comic strip? And if this was a bit of a ramble, just discount it off the record. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.